Artificial intelligence is reinventing business as we speak. You can either get up to speed or get left behind. The choice is yours, and really, it's a no-brainer. Join Cognitive Path founders Geoff Livingston and Greg Verdino as they chat with AI experts about the latest ideas, trends, and technologies that are creating the future of business today. This is No Brainer.
Hey everybody, this is Geoff Livingston and welcome to the No Brainer podcast. We are joined today by my good friend, DC running mate, so to speak, Greg Kihlstrom. But before we get into that, I do want to ask everybody to please subscribe, like this podcast, chat if you would, to juice those algorithms and all that fun stuff. You can find this on YouTube, cast of characters of podcast networks. Reviews are very helpful as well. And also a brief note that our good friend Greg Verdino is at a conference today, will not be able to join us. And so with that, let me introduce our special guest today, who is, again, Greg Kihlstrom, who is known for his Agile brand work, his series of books on the topic, and obviously his excellent consulting practice. I've known him as an agency owner, and he's become a very, very successful thought leader in the marketing and AI space as well. And just to be very, very clear, Greg is doing us a mitzvah today because we are re-recording this after I bonked the audio on the last podcast. Greg, welcome to the No Brainer podcast.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Very cool. So how are you? We're in December. I think people will get this at the very beginning of January once the holidays roll out. But how are you doing? You ready for the holidays, my man?
Yeah, definitely ready. It's been a good year, but busy year. It's nice when things kind of wind down a little bit towards the end of the year, but sometimes they wind up less than others, I guess you could say. So again, hard to complain about being busy, but it's a good year.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the whole AI thing is really starting to get into overdrive right now. So
Yeah, definitely.
So it's on, as they say. So let's just start with a softball. GPT just passed its 2-year anniversary. Just so folks know, again, this is the beginning of December, this past weekend. So we're going into year 3 of the LLM craze, if you would, the generative AI. What's your take on it? Where are we going with this right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still a lot of optimism out there about this stuff, but I think a lot of companies and others that have been doing this for the 3 years that this has existed, we've kind of gotten past the shiny object phase and starting to getting some results, but also starting to hit some speed bumps as far as we have to be a little more practical about how we're using these things, and everybody's been trying a million different things, and I think companies are starting to feel the pain there too. They've got 20 solutions for every problem that they were trying to solve. So I think we're in this period of we need to reconcile all of this stuff that's kind of out there, all these ideas and good ideas as well as maybe less strategic ideas out there, and really start making some headway as far as like achieving real company strategies. I think we've been playing with toys, in other words, for a little bit, and it's been super fun, no complaints, but it's time to get more real about it, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And it's kind of funny. I do feel like that pain you're talking about comes from one type of adopter more than any, which is the AI is pixie dust and it's going to change my entire work process, right? Where they've really bought the hype cycle, if you would, and then they open the magic GPT box, so to speak, since we are just rolling out of the holidays or rolling into them, depending on when you're with. So it's just so disappointing, right? Because it's just not that. I mean, it's very useful on very small subtasks, but
yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot of well-meaning executives that read all the McKinsey and Gartner and all the write-ups early on in Gen AI days, so to speak. And I write this newsletter for LinkedIn called AI Isn't a Goal or a Strategy, because literally, I'm not going to name names, but literally a goal for the year was AI. Like no there were sub bullets to that goal, but that was the goal. And so just looking at that, that's just not the way to think about it. I think those that have thought about AI as a connector of things, and I know we'll get more into this later, but those that are thinking about AI the right way have been wildly successful. Those that have thought of it as the silver bullet to cure all all woes or whatever, like, they're probably still struggling.
Yeah, I kind of liken it to running a little bit. It's like this year I plan to breathe while I run.
Yeah.
But it's really just technology, and as such, it's the next generation of apps. So let's get into a little bit of this deeper implementation chat. And obviously, you're the agile guy, and quote unquote. Sorry, guys are feeling, yeah, he's the agile guy. But with that in mind, how are agile principles really helpful for folks looking to adapt AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think as with anything, but I mean specifically with it's so hard for. I mean, I work primarily with larger organizations. I know you do as well, whether it's Fortune 1000s, larger, and even if you're a small company, a lot of this stuff applies. But large organizations cannot do anything super quick. They can do amazing, huge things, but it takes time to do them. And the best way to do anything is piece by piece and learn as you go, and learn from ultimately your mistakes, because you're going to make a ton of mistakes. How bad those mistakes are based on how quickly you learn and adapt and a lot of other things. So to me, agile principles apply to just about, I think they apply to life, but I think they apply to AI because there's so much new and there's so much untested stuff out there that has to get tried, and there have to be some advanced teams that like do new stuff and again fail, because I think the smart leaders out there understand that failure isn't like a bad thing. It's just it's really not failure if you learn, but any experiment, you're not going to be 100% successful, or else it's not really an experiment. So I think that applies to AI very well. And again, those organizations that have started small, iterated, built all of that in that agile fashion have been more successful.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get that feeling with agile and AI in particular, because it's never really what you think it's going to be, and it takes a lot of iterations to get it where you want to. Even in the marketing sense, creating the template or the prompt, if you would, to get that specific brand voice right, and to get that particular document the way that the brand wants it to be, is often a several step process. It's not a presto moment. Why do people have so many rigid, kind of hard, this is the way we're going to do AI, and we're going to have this implementation and this outcome? And they don't go into these implementations with that pilot mentality. What's your thinking on why we're there right now?
I think it's a culture of, and this isn't one company, this is most companies, most leadership dynamics, everyone's afraid to mess up. And I don't blame them, because there's layoffs and there's companies driven by financials, which again, a for-profit company has to be driven by financials, but everyone's afraid to mess up. And there's not a culture of, we've got to try some stuff before we understand what works for us. I also think that there's just a fundamental misunderstanding of what AI can really do for organizations. I mean, there was a study last summer, Pega and another company did a study on executives claiming to know what Gen AI was, but yet failing to be able to define it. And it was I forget the exact number, but it was like 2/3 or more of executives were actually unable to accurately define what Gen AI was, yet it was a goal for the year. Again, nebulous goal of, I don't know what a goal of Gen AI even is, but there's this understanding gap, and the people on the ground doing the work probably understand it a little bit better. But if they're afraid to mess up, then they're only going to try so much, and thus they're only going to be so successful.
Yeah, what do you think we could do to help executives get there and understand that this thing is changing quickly, moves very quickly? There are all sorts of challenges with data, that kind of thing.
Yeah, first, I think they just need to learn a little bit more about it and just get educated on it and try stuff. I think even an executive who hasn't used ChatGPT yet, there's no excuse for not using some of these tools that are free and freely available and stuff like that. So first is just like write a prompt, like just dip your toes in the water at the very least. But then I think it's understanding that AI is a means to an end. It can be extremely helpful when you think about it. I talk in like it's a horizontal thing. So I look at Agile the same way, or even other things, but you don't have an Agile department, just like I don't think you should have an AI department, but AI can help marketing and customer experience, service, sales, all of those kinds of things. And it works best actually because it takes tons of data to work well, and it feeds on just volumes of data. So it works best when it works across departments and silos anyway. And so I think when a CMO thinks about how AI can best help them, they need to partner with the people sitting next to them at the executive table and be like, okay, I can use it like this. What could I feed you? That's when AI really gets powerful.
Right. So moving through this kind of thread where we're talking about AI as a strategy, kind of not really working, or AI as a goal, if you would. How can people start thinking about AI as something that enables them to succeed with their efforts? Basically turning it into, I already do or engage in marketing automation activities. How can AI make that better?
Yeah, I think there's three pain points for I work primarily with marketers, but some other areas as well. But so there's three pain points. One is efficiency, and I think we hear a lot about that, and often it's tied to job cuts and other things like that, but it doesn't have to be. Efficiency, like what are people spending way too much time doing that pulls them away from the thing that you as a leader actually want them to be doing? That would be the first thing. The second thing would be, how do we reach customers on as one-to-one level as we possibly can? You can't hire enough people to make personalized messaging for 5 million customers. Like it would take 3 million marketing employees to probably do that. So how do you do personalize at scale? And then I think the third thing would be, how do you rapidly create a feedback loop so that you understand what's happening, not like a month later or a quarter later, but like almost real time, near real time? And how do you then take that and predict what's going to happen next? If you think about those three pillars, pick one. You don't even have to pick all three. Pick one of those and then think about, okay, here's how AI can help.
Right. It's almost like with that update, you might even want to have an agile culture where you have a daily stand up and scrum
and move it. And maybe one of those three is really a pain point versus the other two, or maybe all three are, but you can't do everything at once. And so you prioritize, you have your own backlog of sorts of, okay, we're going to move the needle on personalization this month. And so we're going to focus our efforts there. But next month, we got to get better at prediction. And then, but as long as you're kind of moving, and in other areas of the business, there's plenty of other things to consider. But I think those pillars can be applied to a lot of other areas of the business.
Very cool. Obviously, like one of the first areas people look at is, and this seems to be part of the trend right now, is efficiency and productivity, basically cost cutting, time savings, that kind of thing, which that opens a dangerous door in its own right with human replacement. But why aren't people focused on ROI so much, like hard revenue impacts from AI right now? Is it because they just don't understand it well enough yet to see how it can do that? Or are they just not measuring ROI in their efforts, generally speaking?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know that I have a great answer to it, but I have the same question. I think it's a little bit harder. So I think one thing, we're still working through, big data was like a buzzword like 15 years ago or something now. Like we're still working through, what do we do? First it was like, let's collect all the data in the world and just put it somewhere, right? And then we had to find bigger and bigger places to put it. Now we're like, okay, we have all this stuff, but it's sitting over there. How do we access it? We're still working through all of that, and getting ROI requires you to be connected to all this data that you've been collecting for years and years and years. I think efficiency is a lot easier because it's tangible, and it's, as a manager, as a leader, it's like you see people doing the wrong things. And so I think it's easier to just redirect some of that effort than it is to focus on, I would argue, probably the more important things of how are we getting ROI and all this. So not a great answer, but I think it's tied up in the just lack of access that we have to this data in a meaningful way.
Yeah, maybe AI can help clear up some of those analytics.
Right.
And obviously that's one of the strengths of the AI suite of tools. That's ML. It's not sexy. It's not generative AI. It's not going to make any VP's big board goal. But, that being said, just having that clarity is massive. Cleaning up that data side of the house is just, it's like the holy grail, and everybody's got that sloppy, messy attic there.
Right. Well, yeah. And when you do that, not only do the execs get their nice dashboards and stuff on a weekly, monthly basis or whatever, but then you start like democratizing, and you get the people on the front lines or the managers or whoever that are able to literally ask a question of how many widgets did we sell in Austin, Texas last week that in the color gray or whatever. And instead of that taking 5 weeks to get a data team to pull some report that will never be created again, all of a sudden people get more access to exactly a question, to an answer that they need in the moment. The tools exist, but we're not quite there yet where we can really see the benefits of that. But I believe the benefits are, things are going to start changing for the better because people actually have access to the answers that they need in real time.
Yeah, I think one of the more dynamic implementations I'm starting to see organizations really try to build towards is getting either Tableau or Power BI, depending on whether they're a Salesforce or Microsoft environment, cooking with the AI and basically more dynamic with querying and finding trends, et cetera, pattern recognition of things and segmentation, personalization needs, that kind of thing. Even just sloppy messes with the data, like where there are problems, but then bolting on the LLM interface into it, which allows people to query Power BI, query Tableau in normal terms without having to go through the hoops that most people cannot currently execute with Power BI or Tableau, thereby democratizing those analytics. And I do think that's going to be like a really common case study. And maybe in about I'd say it's still probably about 12 months to 18 months out, but we've seen that pop, I'm not kidding you, 3 times in the past 2 months.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's hugely powerful to plug when you plug Copilot into Power BI. Like, it's huge opportunities there. I think there's going to be lots of other challenges with that down the road as well. Just because people have access to data doesn't mean they're going to ask, frankly, intelligent questions of it or draw the right assumption. But that's part of the process, right? First, we have to give them access. And I think giving access, and even with guardrails of here's the right things to ask or whatever, I think teams are going to need greater education and all that. But first, let's give them the tools to do it, right?
Right. And the other challenge too is now you're going to find out how bad your data is. And I think I had a really podcast before this. We had Sanjeev Pulipka, and we'll drop a link in the profile, but we were talking about this data problem, and he said, look, everybody's got the data problem. That's why whenever we do an implementation now, we don't even bother to get your data clean. We'll clean it as part of the implementation, but we just expect that to be part of the problem. And maybe that's a healthy conversation instead of like this. I don't know about you, but every time we talk to a client, it's like this moment of shame, right? The data moment of shame where it's kind of like, I was kind of wearing specs. It's terrible.
And I think it's also just there's another trend that I'm seeing, which is just this insourcing of the reporting and data, which has been a long time coming. I'm working with a very large company right now that had probably 100 agencies, but they have 5 agencies with different data doing customized reporting that nobody knows how the reports are made. It's sort of this black box that they get this report every month or whatever. And so companies, just like they're bringing in other things in-house, and rightfully, they need to bring the data reporting, all this stuff in-house as well. And I think that's part of this, is to even get all this stuff reconciled. You also need to understand what have other people been doing with this that have been valuable, and how do we recreate this? What do we not need to? So there's a whole tangle of mess, to your point. Again, like, we've been collecting data, like that's part of the solution, I guess, is collecting it, but we haven't been very good stewards of that data. And to your other point, is just, it's kind of the reckoning of, we're realizing just how bad and what the implications of not, frankly, doing it well for years and years and years is.
That's kind of like waking up middle-aged and realizing you need to exercise. Let's talk about that employee angle now. We did get into the productivity and efficiency a little bit, hinted at this, but obviously people are very concerned about losing their jobs. Is there a way we can make AI adoption less threatening, or is this just part of the evolution of job roles where you're either able to do it or you're not, and AI makes some people more attractive in the workplace?
Yeah, I think there are going to be, or there already have been, job losses. I think there are going to be more. But I do think in the long run, as we've seen time and time again, there are going to be more jobs created out of this. We just don't know exactly what they are yet, because we never did, right? I was a webmaster, like, straight out of college.
So was I. Did you code? Did you hand code?
Yeah. Like, I taught myself HTML. I was a, like, old school, like, photography major in the dark room in college. And I was like, I'm going to learn HTML because this internet thing seems interesting. And then got a job as a webmaster, and that job did not exist 10 years, probably not even 5 years prior or whatever, but we don't know what's coming down the road. People have been talking and making jokes about prompt engineers and stuff like that, but, like,
I still make jokes about prompt engineers, by the way.
Yeah, I look at it similar to Google searcher in the early 2000s or something. It's a necessary thing. And
it's a stepping stone,
but
yeah.
I think there's going to be a loss of jobs, and it's going to be a lot of people whose jobs are easy to automate or things like that. I would argue that was a lot of that was probably a long time coming anyway. Some of it may catch more people off guard and might not have been anticipated, but then there are going to be new jobs created. It just, every time this happens, everyone runs around like their hair's on fire, and then all of a sudden, 5 years later, there's more jobs, there's more wealth, there's more, all this stuff.
So how could people or concerned employees be a part of that growth rather than being part of the, I guess, out of work?
Yeah, I mean, learn how these tools work, just like the advice for the executives. Learn how these tools work, and have a good understanding. I would say focus on, again, to use the horizontal work, focus on horizontal skills like strategy and problem solving and analysis of things. Like, focus on those kinds of things, as opposed to, I'm going to design Instagram reels. And it's like, anytime you're that focused on something, like,
You're endangered, right?
yeah, have fun with it, go nuts or whatever, but, like, be thinking about maybe what's coming after Instagram reels and stuff like that. So sorry for those that listen out there that do Instagram reels professionally, but it is what it is. So, like, start thinking about, okay, how do the other skills that I have apply to other areas of the business? And then focus on that stuff.
Cool. I want to dive back into a thread we had earlier in the conversation where you were talking about the CMO needing to work with the executive team, and maybe, at least from what some of our experiences, we see CIO's office has to be part of that. Obviously, legal. AI as a horizontal capability is something you talk about a lot. And obviously, having allies across the enterprise to embrace this new, almost business lubricant, if you would. How can they approach this? How does AI really benefit them in doing so?
Yeah. So, looking from the marketer's perspective, because again, that's often where I start from. Marketers have several things on their plate to do, but at the end of the day, them and the rest of their cohorts want customers that are loyal and keep buying, and retention and spreading word of mouth, all that kind of stuff. And so acquiring anyone that's ever done sales knows that it's easier to keep a customer than it is to win a new one, right? So like
Yeah.
marketers understand this too. So as a marketer, it would be smart for you to understand, okay, what happens after I acquire? And that probably means I'm talking with the customer service team, or I'm talking with other folks in that circle of that customer or buyer's journey. And so the more that I can understand about what happens before, after, during the sale, the better I can do my job and the better we can all kind of work towards the win. And then there's other teams, the data team, the IT, however the organization's structured. In a sense, they're there to support all of those teams in a way. And so I think IT gets a bad rap sometimes for being reactive to challenges or things like that. I think maybe data can fall into the same trappings. Instead of that, they are like partners that you should be in lockstep with, and like, let's do some fun stuff together too, but let's actually close these loops instead of just saying, okay, you need a XYZ product. Let's stand it up. And instead of that, let's start thinking about the customer throughout that entire journey. And how do we actually tell that story with technology, with data, with whatever?
I do see an era of better teams rather than these silos. And hopefully this is, like you had said, AI becomes the great moment where people are exposed to their silos and realize they need each other a little bit more.
You never know.
Boy, we're really painting it like a panacea. That kind of reminds me of social media. Remember that? It's going to change the world. It's going to make everything better. 2024. Oh my God. What have we done to ourselves? Obviously, we're seeing silos created because of AI, though. We were joking about the prompt officer, but how about the chief AI officer, right? And obviously, that was the whole federal government approach from the Biden administration. I don't know if that's going to survive the next administration or not.
Right.
But what's your take on that role? Like, isn't that something to avoid rather than to create?
I don't think that companies need another department. Like I can almost say that just unilaterally, like across any company, like there's no need for another department. I think there's, again, as a horizontal, like maybe you have someone that represents the AI function within your team, and that's a way to do it. I mean, there's
Don't they
schools
report to the CTO, though, or something? I don't know.
in my mind, again, like someone focused on AI in a customer experience function would report to whoever that rolls up to and work with their peers or whatever. There's various schools
Maybe
of
they'd
thought
be
also.
agile? No.
It would be like having a department of Agile or whatever as well. What does that mean? Maybe there's a project management office, but that would be under some other. I think there can be varying schools of thoughts on the value of like centers of excellence as well. That's something that can work. It doesn't always work, but it can work as well to put stuff that doesn't fit in a department anywhere else. I've seen it work and I've seen it not work. But yeah, I don't think it needs a department because it's kind of in everyone's business, so to speak. I feel similarly about customer experience for what it's worth. And
Everybody's in customer service in a company.
right,
My
right.
opinion, yeah, for sure. Well, I've run through my questions, so I'm gonna throw one at you because we are gonna air this early January here. What's your crystal ball forecast for 2025? You don't. This is just, again, people do not pin them to the wall on this. This is just fudging around. I'll put a couple out there too, so you're not alone being out on the ledge.
Always happy to be wrong about predictions. I think there's a lot of talk about agentic AI right now. That's certainly, it's not a new thing for 2025, but I think it's going to be the thing that everyone's talking about and scrambling to do. I worry that they still haven't figured out what to do with the last thing, but the wheel of progress, right? So I think that AI agents, it's going to be a big thing. There's going to be a lot of that in the tools that you use. Microsoft obviously came out with stuff and others, but
Agent Force.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's going to be like everybody's going to have their own, and I think that's going to cause its own problem. I think I look at it as, I said this a year ago, and I think I was probably wrong about it a year ago, but maybe it's like the year of mobile was like 4 years in a row, and then it finally, like an iPhone came out and it kind of happened. But I think this reconciliation of all these tools sitting out there, all these teams working in silos on AI problems or goals or whatever. I think I would like it to be the year where all this stuff gets reconciled and teams start working together and starting to shut off some AI stuff in service of unifying under one or a few umbrellas of that. And that's maybe more a hope than a prediction.
I definitely agree with you that agents are going to be the buzz. So I can't own that one, but it's definitely going to be the buzz. And I totally agree that they can't even walk yet. So how are they going to run? Because if you think about an agent stringing together complex automated tasks together, if you can't even automate one task with AI, learn how to walk.
And I would say maybe a prediction is that there is going to be a customer experience nightmare that happens in a multi-agent situation. I don't even know what it is yet, but some really bad stuff is going to, hopefully not catastrophic bad, but something really unfortunate is going to happen when one agent talks to another and gives a customer not at all what they wanted. And hopefully it's just that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that too. And one of the reasons why I think it's going to happen is this data problem that we were talking about earlier. If you don't take the time to clean up your data, with an agent, what you have is multiple points of failure. And you can't necessarily identify what it is.
Right.
That actually set the whole agent off the rails. All right, here's my crazy prediction. I totally agree. We're going to have all these challenges. People are going to be banging their head against the wall. But I think the next round of iPhone drops, they're going to be aha moment for personal AI, where suddenly a lot better and more able to string tasks together, at least with Siri. I just foresee this year really serving as AI sandbox for Apple or Apple Intelligence or whatever they're calling it.
Yeah.
Reality is like, they put out their announcement, they've got their architecture. It's going to take a year for all these apps to tag themselves accordingly so that Siri can string them together. So it'll be really interesting to see where we are next fall with Apple Intelligence, because I do think they're the ones that tend to get customer service right or that experience right, and then they basically perfect what everybody screws up. So that's one. Two, either Anthropic or OpenAI gets acquired by their investor daddy. So that being Amazon or Microsoft, yeah. So,
yeah, definitely, and possibly each. There's going to be to that point. I think there's going to be some consolidation. I mean, there's just way too many one-off AI things sitting out there, so there's going to be a ton and the investment kind of mindset is shifting a little bit from, rather than throwing money at anything that has AI in it or whatever, to being a little more conservative with that. I'm sure they'll chase something else, but
revenue. Do you make him revenue?
Yeah. So yeah, I think a lot of these like one-off tools either go away or get snapped up and rolled into something. Whether it's better or not is, remains to be seen. But
yeah, there's a whole second tier of these LLMs, and third tier, really. Like I think of Perplexity, for example, and
right.
they're there, but they're just kind of orbiting beyond the asteroid belt. It seems they just can't seem to break through, and I just totally see them getting snapped up by somebody like an Adobe or something like that.
Yeah.
Very good. All right, brother. I appreciate seeing you, man. It's been a while. I think the last time I saw you was September, right?
Yeah. Well, great to see you.
Yeah, man. Really appreciate it. Where can people find you?
Sure. Yeah. So two places. So I'm really active on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with me there. And then you can go to my website. It's just gregkihlstrom.com.
All right. And we'll drop those links in the show notes. And please buy Greg's books. They're outstanding. Really sharp guy. I hope you get a chance to see him on the speaking circuit. He is fairly certain you're speaking like, what, twice a month right now?
I get around, I guess. Yeah, you could say. Yeah.
You're out there, man. You're one of the best speakers out there. So I hope you guys get to see Greg speak. He's very engaging. And with that, please, again, like this podcast, share it with your friends, comment to Juice That Algorithm, subscribe, and do leave a review. We really appreciate it. And with that, we are out of here.